the Rubicon here. I mean, now that we have a court that has found it factual that there has been a seditious conspiracy against our democracy, we've crossed a major threshold. A jury of their peers, over a number of weeks, looked at a great number of facts that were put before them and definitions of laws that have been very little prosecuted in this country. Seditious conspiracy being one of the rarest and most serious, statutes, in the U.S. Code of Law, and they found that those standards were met for prosecution, that these people intended to use violent force to overthrow our democracy and impose their will. They are convicted of that crime. They are convicted of the crime of interfering in our democracy's peaceful transfer of power. And everybody that helped them is part of that conspiracy. And that's the conspiracy they're part of. Not political speech, not of tourism, not of getting caught up in the moment, not of I made a poor decision. No, this is a crime of seditious conspiracy, of plotting to overthrow the government by force and to stop our votes from counting by force. It's now a fact.
Only two of the people who were originally charged with the seditious conspiracy charge were found guilty of that charge. Others were found guilty of lesser charges. So that doesn't necessarily weaken the case here at all. It just means that the jury was careful and was listening and perhaps thought that there was just a lot more culpability in the Stuart Rhodes character and in Kelly Meg's character, because they were the ones, in fact, coordinating the seditious conspiracy in this case, far more than Jessica Watkins, Kenneth Harrison, or Thomas Caldwell, who were definitely in senior positions in it, but they weren't sort of the head honchos.
So, you're looking at a number of charges here. There's seditious conspiracy is exactly what it says. It's we're in a conspiracy to commit sedition, which is to oppose the government by force. But some of the definitions can be subtle. Like, what is the difference between the sedition part and the obstruction part? Like, it was very clear that some of these folks, because there were different crimes that were charged, some of these folks were trying to keep the vote from being counted. But I think Rhodes was part of the crew that was looking to keep the government frozen so that these fake electors could come in and impose a whole different set of rules on everybody that was outside of the Constitution. And those are light differences. You're looking at whether or not the conspiratorial aspect, some of the communications that were going on between the different individuals, whether that was tantamount to they were part of the conspiracy to overthrow the government, as opposed to get in the way of the vote, stop the steal. Again, these are very serious, exotic crimes. This is a once in 2.5. This is a twice in 2.5 century thing for America, where we've had a group of people that decided that they wanted to change the direction of this nation by force, by raising up a militia and sending them against other Americans. It's only happened twice in our history. One was 1861, and the other was last January. So there's not a lot of prosecution for this kind of thing. I think there's a couple other examples that were small attempts to, I think it might have been a state government here or there. I'll have to look through my history notes. But this is far more major. So what was put before the jury was voluminous, and it was detailed, and they were given dozens of pages of instructions on how to find the different crimes. I mean, they got the best of due process. They got the best of the American system that they would have denied to the rest of us.
Indeed. And of course, we should remind people who they are. I mean, the Oath Keepers are an interesting group of former veterans, mostly, who, throughout the years have been engaged in all sorts of interesting things, whether it's the birther movement or a whole bunch of other sort of fringe political events. But on this day, on January the 6th, they're the ones who formed these stack formations, these military formations that really stuck out. I mean, you really notice the difference between these guys in military uniform with their hands, on the person's in front of their shoulder as they were walking towards the Capitol, and versus everyone else who might have been there for political reasons, but certainly not with the same kind of intent of overthrowing the government. But who knows? Maybe they were there for that reason. And then we have this very famous photo of them inside, and again, you still see them in formation here. These are mostly the same people, or some of the same people who were indicted and charged and found guilty today. You see Connie Meggs and Kelly Meggs, their husband and wife team from Florida. Kelly's the one who was found guilty of seditious conspiracy as being Stuart Rhodes' number 2 person. But you also see Jessica Watkins there. She was part of that formation. She's a very interesting figure on that very incredible audio tape, which we played back on Narrative a while ago, of their communication during their movements. Jessica Watkins was one of the key people we heard in that audio tape, and people can go back to our episode of Narrative called The Stack and really relive that entire time period as we play back some of the audio tape. It's really interesting stuff. The other 2 people... so go ahead.
I'm just thinking a picture is worth 1,000 words here. We've been getting into the semantics of what is seditious conspiracy and, what were the extent of the crimes here. But, this one picture here, you look, there's a bunch of people who are in infantry uniform. It might have been pieced together from army surplus stores or whatnot. So I forget how many people actually had a military background of this little crew of miscreants here. But the stack formation, the one hand on the next person's shoulder, that's that's a typical tactical maneuver for people who might be in like an urban combat setting or close quarters with a lot of civilians around where they don't, it's not like an open firefight in the forest or something like that. But either way, it's these are military tactics. And, teaching those military tactics that you learn from the United States military outside of the United States military without the permission of the United States military is itself a crime that gets investigated by the ATF. Because, the information on how we train our soldiers is kept classified. And these guys turned that against Nancy Pelosi. So...
Yeah. And these guys trained. I mean, they trained for a long time. I remember reading the initial indictments, that there was...
They did some sit-ups, Zeb. Let's not overdo it.
They did full-on militia training. I mean, in various places. I mean, I couldn't believe the extent of the coordination here and the commitment they had to doing this. And, of course, the Oath Keepers were also the ones who had a stack of weapons across the river, waiting for them in a hotel. I mean, it's not like they were just there for a picnic. They were intending to be in there for the long haul.
That's the part where they get into real trouble. There is that they brought a bunch of long guns, and they were and they had a plan to go pick them up, and that's really where things get into trouble.
To situate everyone into the whole day's event. There was sort of 5 incursions that happened almost simultaneously around the Capitol. That's how coordinated everything was. And this was, these guys with Oath Keepers that came in through the east doors at around 2:39, according to our timing back then. And it just reminds me, as I was looking back through some of the material today, how coordinated this was, how the entire Capitol was circled by protesters and different groups of militias, all who had been trained to do certain things. And here they were. These are the Oath Keepers, and they were there to do, and it's interesting, Stuart Rhodes never actually entered the building that day, I don't think. Yet he's found guilty of seditious conspiracy because he planned it. And that's going to be very, very instrumental when you think about whether Roger Stone should be ultimately charged, and whether Alex Jones should be charged, whether Donald Trump should be charged. You didn't have to have been there to be found guilty of seditious conspiracy.
Not at all. That's the thing about conspiracies. You don't got to be the one showing up doing the physical stuff.
Right. So, I mean, just because they weren't there on the ground necessarily does not mean that they're going to get off. So, Roger Stone will swear up and down he was in the Willard hotel room all the way through there. Maybe he was. But that doesn't mean he gets off. Certainly when you think about this famous picture that we've shown many times here on Narrative of Roger Stone. This is the day before, I think it's the night before January the 6th. You see one of his soldiers, one of the people who was guarding him, has an Oath Keeper's cap on. He was also charged.
Sure.
And they're as part of the Proud Boys, I think. But still, there he is with an Oath Keeper's cap on. So, there's a lot of that you can see around Roger Stone. Remember that videotape we had of him in the morning outside the Willard Hotel, surrounded by Oath Keepers, surrounded by Proud Boys. Those guys, many of them are going to be found guilty of seditious conspiracies, and they are going to be, certainly it may be interested in telling their story about Roger Stone. They might be interested in telling their story about Donald Trump, and there's obviously some that have already, flipped and already given their evidence on these guys. So, as we were talking about Kanye West, and we'll be talking a little bit more about Kanye West later on in the show, it's interesting. Roger Stone is behind all of that too. So how does Roger Stone, get to continue to do all this dirty political work in our society? Well, he never gets arrested. And maybe it's time he gets arrested this time, so he can continue to play these dirty tricks on all of us whenever he feels the heat coming towards him, which may be the reason why we've even lived through the Kanye West thing. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. In terms of this particular case, I think you've got to really wonder if Roger Stone thinks that the DOJ must be getting pretty close. They must be getting pretty close if Stuart Rhodes has been found guilty of seditious conspiracy.
I mean, he's certainly a character that we know. And obviously this, it's very interesting that touches so close to the president of the United States, especially on that very day. As we've talked about, these guys were working together on that day. They're all in their stupid hotel room with their stupid burner phones, in the most surveilled city outside of London, maybe tied with London. I mean, it's just, this is fairly suicidal as far as missions go. And they've got, it's great. They've got hats like, this is my group of co-conspirators. Right. I mean, for prosecutors, it just doesn't get much more fun than that, right, guys?
Yeah. The fact that you're wearing a gaiter or whatever these things are that you've got in front of your mouth is not really hiding your identity. You've got an Oath Keeper's hat on. I mean, it's pretty telling.
Right?
It's pretty telling.
They got patches. They what's his name? The dude from the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, comes in with, magazines for semi-automatic weapons that are emblazoned with their boy band logo. I mean, it's good, solid stuff.
It is, it certainly tells you very much about how brazen this attack was, and how they didn't think it was either going to fail. I mean, clearly they thought they were going to succeed, and that this would never be a possibility. I wonder if any of them actually considered the fact that, they were going to fail spectacularly, and that, not very long into their future, they would be all be thrown into jail. I don't know if they even thought that. That's such hubris that they were just going to be able to walk in there and succeed because, God had ordained them or something. I don't know what their thinking was, but it certainly feels like they didn't think about the possibility that they were going to be all arrested the way they had.
It's funny you bring up the Deus Vult, God wills it. Have you ever studied the Crusades, Zev?
Not religiously, but I know a little bit about them, but not that much.
I mean, the Crusades are one of history's greatest clusterfucks of like mistaken assumptions, terrible leadership structures, and needless death. It is a smorgasbord of stupidity from the Holy Roman Empire. I highly recommend it in the slapstick comedy thing, but that's the problem, with religious fervor driving your tactical battle plans and experience. They're just totally different. Like, look, there's no atheists in foxholes. This is not coming out against faith. Once you've made your plan with all your expertise, that's when the real prayers go up to heaven. In every foxhole on both sides, no matter what religion people start with, they get one in the foxhole.
In the foxholes, you have to get some religion
however,
at some point.
That's right. However, the odds of success are set by the expertise and the materiel and the supply chain and the quartermasters of actual professional soldiers. There is, faith is no replacement for professionalism and good planning. And these guys are idiots. So if they were relying on faith, and didn't do any of this stuff the only reason they got as far as they did is that nobody opposed them. And that's the thing that we really got to get to here, because as I've said any number of times, in my fantasy football league on January 6th, it's like, I wonder what that would have been like if an Apache AH-86 helicopter from our forces met those guys and just pink spray of MAGA on the front lawn there, or a drone with Hellfire missiles on it. It would have straightened everybody out real quick.
Absolutely, and that's what normally would have happened under these kinds of circumstances. That's exactly what would have happened. I'm going to take a break, and then after that, I want to hear from you about Jack Smith, and I want to hear about so much other things from you. So let's take that break, and we'll be right back after this.
Hi there, it's Zev from Narrative. Have you ever had a great business idea but just didn't know where to start? Well, one of the first steps to building a new business is a domain name by Hover. That's because it's more important than ever to have an online presence, and your domain name by Hover is your first step in building your online brand. For a limited time at hover.com/reach, you get 10% off. Hover makes it quick and easy to find the perfect domain name for your business with over 400 available extensions. And with their Connect feature, you can easily connect your Hover domain name to many popular website builders with just a few clicks. Plus, Hover offers free Who Is Privacy. That's free Who Is Privacy. That protects your personal information from being released online. Don't let the complicated search, sign up, and connection process of other domain providers stop you from starting your online brand today. Hover makes it easy to get started, so what are you waiting for? Find your perfect domain name at hover.com/reach. Plus, Narrative Live viewers get 10% off right now if you use the promo code REACH, that's REACH, or go to hover, hover.com/reach, REACH.
I had to pronounce it extra carefully this time. So it is a great service, by the way, to get your domain names. Maybe Roger Stone wants to get some new businesses set up for when he goes to prison. He can set up a dating service inside prison, or a casting service. I don't know what Roger Stone might need as a domain name, but he maybe can use hover.com and get 10% off, Roger, or anybody else who want to start a business. That's a great place to get your domain name listed. I left before the commercial break wanting to hear from you, Eric, about Jack Smith and what's he going to make of all of this, and what is his as he reads these verdicts, as he hears about these verdicts, he's going to feel somewhat emboldened, I would think, to take next steps quite quickly.
Well, I mean, the timing here is uncanny. That Smith is pulled out of The Hague, where he is the lead prosecutor. He is coordinating all the other prosecutors in a system that would not be dissimilar to the structure that we had of Robert Mueller and all his prosecutors underneath him, or a U.S. Attorney's office with a U.S. attorney supervising assistant U.S. attorneys who were doing the prosecuting on a number of topics. Mr. Smith here was pulled off of a special prosecution unit that was looking at war crimes in the former Yugoslavia, in the now quote Kosovo, but the Kosovar militia that had sway there before power was reestablished that was legitimate. So this is circa 1998-99. Mm-hmm. They were looking at human trafficking and the most extreme war crimes possible, including not just disappearances, murder, and inhumane conditions, but also the harvesting and sale of human organs. So it could not be more serious, topics that prosecutor Jack Smith was working on. So
I'm reminded that Donald Trump's administration had us pull out of the war crimes court. It certainly was very opposed to. In fact, they threatened the judges, if I'm not mistaken, with some sort of weird penalty.
What they did was they imposed sanctions on any ICC judge or personnel who would be looking at who would be looking at American personnel or our allies, which is a very broad group. And the interesting part is that happened in about June of 2020, which is around the time that the GOP got their polling data back about how they were going to do in the election, as well as the time you get the George Floyd's murder and you get the protests that follow on, the militarization of that, and, you know, really the lead up to January 6th. So, yeah, it's very interesting. And I did do some research, tried to find out if there was any direct interference with his prosecutors coming and goings. I couldn't find anything. It certainly wasn't a friendly move.
Yeah.
But here we are. He's back home.
He looks like a tough guy. He looks like one of those guys you don't want to mess with. I mean, I don't know if that's just his expression from his photo, but, you know, he looks like he's in business. Certainly judging worry lines on his forehead there. He looks like he's had a few concerns in his life and he's handled them well. I mean, he's not. It doesn't look like he's going to certainly shirk from responsibility.
Well, you know, I've read the pleadings in the war crimes cases, only one of which I think has come to conviction, which was for obstruction of justice, by the way, witness intimidation. And the rest of the war criminals are there pending as we speak. And there's a huge connection to Russia in there, at least a assumed connection to some Chinese elements. Complicated time, complicated place. Over 20 years ago, we're still dealing with that period of history. And I've read the charging documents. It doesn't get a lot rougher than the kinds of, you know.
There's cases pending now from Ukraine as well. There's a whole bunch of Russian cases. I think Prigozhin in particular has been named as a likely person who's going to be charged at The Hague for war crimes.
Well, I want to be clear. There's other things going on at The Hague. This is just the special counsel that was appointed just for the Kosovar war crimes that are still being untangled 25 years on. So that's what he came off, and you know, no doubt they've left it in good hands. And so Mr. Smith here finds himself in this position of prosecuting the upper echelon of this January 6th crew, because in order to make it so that this group of jackwagons who roll in, you know, they call it, you know, they did all this heavy militia training. I mean, look, they were doing push-ups and sit-ups and, like, you know, jumping over logs and, you know, going to the firing range. I mean, there's a lot of guys from that's like, you know, a dude's weekend or, you know, a summer vacation that they, you know, arrange to do all together or whatnot and get in good shape. It's a spa week, if you will. You know, they are not the same as Marine riflemen, as I've pointed out any number of times. The real question is, why did they meet no resistance? And we have uncovered a lot of those answers on this show, which is that people stood down intentionally, that the people that the Trump administration, you know, pistoned up into certain positions of responsibility, particularly in the Department of Defense, dropped our pants and you know, blocked the, you know, the various forces from defending the Capitol. And were it not for that,
on the orders of the president, probably on the orders of the president, in all likelihood, on the orders of the president. Who's ultimately,
well, I would say it doesn't matter. He's the commander in chief. Yeah. He was clearly, you know, he was clearly pushing for those guys to do what they were going to do. So whether it was by omission or commission, you know, Trump is responsible because he was the commander in chief that day, and he, you know, he made the personnel decisions. Whether or not there was a word given here or there, I think is moot. That's the kind of thing that the prosecutors will decide. But now we have blood in the water. Now we have a conviction for the most serious crime. And now we can tie what everybody else did, whether we're talking about Missouri Senator-elect Eric Schmidt getting the Republican Attorney General Association to foot the bill for the robocalls to assemble the attackers, or, you know, the
Proud Boys,
the Proud Boys, the
whole bunch of
Clarence Thomas, Alito, any of them, anybody touching this, they are all at risk here. So
Because now you've got the
And
actual
now,
jury saying there has been a seditious conspiracy and that they have found 2 people guilty on that. So now you've got a whole bunch of people that could be questioned. I'm actually quite interested in what Mr. Rand Paul is going to have to say. After all, Stuart Rhodes came out of the Ron Paul universe and has very close ties to Rand Paul. So, yeah, he might have been reelected, but I still have very serious questions about, where does all that money come from to set up all these organizations like the Oath Keepers, and how did they get funneled through, or the Tea Party? How do they get funneled to these organizations through maybe Mr. Ron Paul and Rand Paul? And of course, Ron Paul, is a publisher, a notorious publisher, of very interesting literature, if you'd call it that many people followed, and is part of the reason we got the Tea Party in the initial circumstances. And both Rand Paul and Ron Paul are regular visitors to the Kremlin, where they, in one case, like to deliver mail. That's what Rand Paul did, but Ron Paul used to go to Moscow all the time. For what reason ultimately was he going there? And how much of that has to do with Stuart Rhodes and the Oath Keepers is still an outstanding question for me, which I'd really be interested to know the answer to.
It's funny you bring them up because we had a conviction of a guy named Jesse Benton the other day who was convicted for funneling money from Russian intelligence into Trump's campaign. And prior to that, I forget if he'd been charged or convicted of funneling Russian money into Ron Paul's campaign, and Trump got him pardoned. But Benton was tried for another crime that was, instead of the 2012 election, getting Russian money into the 2016 election, and he was found guilty. And he was Mitch McConnell's campaign manager, he was Ron Paul's campaign manager, and Rand Paul's campaign manager. So the Paul boys here have got a little explaining to do.
Absolutely.
And they've got 2 of their top guys are now felons, jailbirds.
Yeah, it certainly looks like there's, the time is coming for Rand Paul to answer to some of these questions, because it's surprising that he has so many ties, and he stands when it comes to vaccines and all that crazy stuff he did for that period of time during the Trump years, clearly indicating that he's one of Russia's most favored senators in our Senate. I want to talk a lot about Kanye West today. Not a lot, but I want to talk a little bit about Kanye West. And I know you have limited patience for this topic because it's so distracting from the news. But I hope you bear with me here, because it is. I'm sorry, here I am. It is fairly relevant to figure out exactly how Kanye West came to be this notorious anti-Semite in just a matter of weeks, and the way it was developed as a narrative involving many of the faces that we recognize from January the 6th, people like Alex Jones, people like Roger Stone, all involved. This Candace Owens is there too, and Tucker Carlson. I mean, I'm going to walk you through this stage by stage here so everyone gets an understanding of this process that made Kanye West, a somewhat surprising anti-Semite. Maybe he was an anti-Semite before, but he certainly evolved quite quickly into one. And how the same machine that helped create January the 6th helped create this anti-Semitic event around Kanye West and Fuentes and Trump that we've been witnessing. It all started on October the 3rd, when during Fashion Week, Kanye and Candace Owens appeared with these White Lives Matter T-shirts, which was, humorous, they thought, also obviously a protest. It's important to note that Kanye's career as a fashion designer hasn't been that great. He's been really troubled lately because he believes that Louis Vuitton fired him basically for the wrong reasons and hired his assistant, whatever the case might be. He feels, that there's been people who've done him wrong. But on this day, on October the 3rd, he's at Paris Fashion Week, and he and Candace Owens, a product really of the Mercers, as many people say, is sort of this, black conservative figure who has a talk show and a documentary coming out all about, about MAGA and how she's supportive of that. So both Kanye and Candace Owens and Candace Owens are big supporters of the MAGA movement. We'll go to them. They show up with this White Lives Matters T-shirts, and they get, roundly criticized by people who say this is ridiculous. How can you do that? You're diminishing the value of people's lives. Of course, White Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. It was a stunt more than anything else, probably to cover for a pretty lackluster fashion appearance. But lo and behold, October the 6th, just 2 days later, who jumps in to interview Yi? Tucker Carlson, who probably never had reason to interview Yi before, suddenly gives Yi like a couple of big nights to discuss his concerns about the world, which includes his concerns around Jews and about Louis Vuitton. I can play a little bit about what he said about Louis Vuitton and why he's upset about Louis Vuitton. This is from the outtakes.
I felt with Bernard Arnault, not only did he pull on the deal that contributed to me breaking down and go back on his word with that, he also went on to hire multiple people out of my organization.
So that's really his beef. He's got this beef with Louis Vuitton. And I think the guy that he's talking to happens to be Jewish, and he's got these, he's upset about that. October 6th, Tucker Carlson does this lengthy interview. I'll let you listen to it. I listened to the entire thing. It's quite weird. But there's a little bit of anti-Semitism. I mean, there are a couple of very anti-Semitic comments about Jews not being able to dance as well as black people. They're not serious kind of, critiques of Judaism or Jewish people, but they're still fit into that category, and certainly around the idea that Jews control the financial world and the media world. He leans into that quite a lot. So then on October the 18th, Roger Stone shows up on Alex Jones's show, and suddenly he's got a great idea. This is just a few days later. I don't know how these people communicate. I don't know if they communicate to the extent that they do this. But, on that show, and I'll find you the clip. I'll find you just a second here. He articulates that it might be a great idea to have Kanye run with Trump.
I still think that President Trump will run in 2024. I still think it is conceivable that, he could announce the Saturday before this election, which would have an electrifying effect on the election itself. And thinking outside of the box, I think his running mate, in all honesty, should be Kanye West. You want to completely shake up and change the electorate? There's a ticket I could really get behind. Now, I'm for the president. I would be very clear about that. But if you want to see the globalists and the political establishment go out of their minds, put forward a Trump-West ticket.
Well, I know they're friends. Do you think Trump and Kanye would go for it together?
Look, I can't speculate about that. But when it comes to his fealty to Jesus Christ, his strong position on life, his outspoken opposition to the cancel culture and censorship, I think he'd be an extraordinarily interesting candidate. And that's the thing about politics. If you're not interesting, if you're boring, the voters go elsewhere. So
and people couldn't believe that Trump, a businessman who never held office, could win. He did. This could be the two businessmen, both pro-America, both free speech candidacy. That's a pretty good idea. Have you told Trump the idea?
I'm not going to comment on that, but two strong Christians. Look, I like to think outside the box, but I think it would electrify the electorate, and it would change 100 years of history. I just throw it out there as an idea, but I think it's intriguing. Here's what I do know. If people have a choice between Kanye West and Kamala Harris, I think I know what they would choose.
Well, absolutely. I think it's a great idea. So we need the Trump-West ticket.
Yeah, let's see who can get the T-shirts up and out faster, you or me.
I mean, this is funny, of course, but it's also the same way we got to January the 6th. These two cartoon characters basically are the reason that January the 6th happened. They originated the idea, some say, in September on the same kind of talk show. So, as we look at the creation of the Yi anti-Semite narrative, which existed for a few days now, it really originates out of the Roger Stone universe. And it's kind of stunning that it originates out of the Roger Stone universe, because Roger Stone is supposedly, at least he tells people all the time, that he's an avowed Zionist. So you've got these two sort of conflicting ideas, that he's backing anti-Semitic figure in Yi and also being pro-Zionist at the same time. And it's one of the challenges, I think, that the GOP is having such struggle to understand how to react to this particular thing. Fast forward to November 22nd, and then this is when Trump invites Fuentes and Yi to a Thanksgiving dinner at Mar-a-Lago. Truly a strange thing to do. I mean, he of course knows who Fuentes is. He's not fooling anybody by saying he doesn't know who Fuentes is. But I want you to listen to Ye's account, how he reacted to the dinner and what his takeaway was from that dinner. So, if I can find it here, but go ahead if you want to say anything here while I quickly just look for this thing. I may not have that particular tape. I'll post it later on. I don't seem to see it here, but there is a tape where Kanye West, in debriefing the events of that day, of that dinner, talks about how Nick Fuentes was influential and how Donald Trump really loves Nick Fuentes, and how it was such a big deal that he walked in there with Nick Fuentes, who by all accounts is also anti-Semitic. There's no doubt about it. But he's more like a comedian. Like, he doesn't seem to have, I'm not scared by these guys. Speaking as a Jew, I'm not scared that these guys are going to come after me. I just feel like they're just a bunch of cartoon characters participating in a Roger Stone show. I don't even think they believe necessarily what they're saying. I don't know if you can see him here in this tweet here, but there's Milo and Fuentes all on the way to Tim Pool's show, which is also an unusual show. And that's where Kanye West walked out of that show because he was convinced, he said, that the Jews were responsible. So here's what he said to Tim Pool yesterday.
To be like defending, I'm not going to go through another, to come in here, I feel like it's a setup to be like defending. I'm not going to go through another, like, I'm literally going to walk the F off the show if I'm sitting up here having a, talk about, you can't say that it was Jewish people that did it, when every sensible person knows that. I mean, Jon Stewart knows what happened to me, and they took it too far. It was like American History X. Like, my head was on the side of the curve, and the exact people that I called out kicked my head. We found out that my trainer was a MK Ultra Canadian intelligence.
He worked in the defense research and development in the Canadian military, essentially working on psyops in the Canadian military. This is Harley Pasternak.
Now, I'm going to tell you, I've encountered Harley Pasternak before, like days as a TV producer. I mean, he's a great trainer, and I think people really enjoy his training. I don't think he's a Canadian intelligence agency agent. I don't think he's involved in MK Ultra. And I think what we're seeing here is he's kind of, he's prosecuting his own personal concerns around LV in the context of him losing that contract with LV. And either these guys are taking advantage of him by positioning him in a position where he, is getting all this attention around his views around anti-Semitism, or he's playing along and he's just doing a big show, as he's been prone to do, or he's quite seriously, he's not necessarily well. He's had a really rough time in the last few years. All of these situations suggest that he shouldn't be, a front man for any of this kind of stuff. But it does seem to me that Roger Stone is pulling the strings of whatever is going on behind this whole anti-Semitism. Any thoughts?
Yeah, but they're both owned intelligence assets. So, I mean, do you think Roger Stone's Israeli intelligence or Russian intelligence, or
I think it might be Israeli intelligence. I don't know, but he, maybe both. I don't know. He certainly, he quite openly likes to declare that he's pro-Zionist all the time. So one suspects he's got some sort of Israeli roots. I mean, I can't hear you. I need to cut out there. I lost your audio. Eric, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
So the mute button got hit there. These guys aren't calling their own shots. So I'm interested what the larger play is. I think generally it's distraction. I'm wondering who's really behind this. In addition to.
Yeah, I think all these guys, Nick Fuentes, all of these guys are ultimately being, positioned into these roles. I find it very difficult to understand how a party can reconcile being pro-Zionist and also house anti-Semites. I mean, it just seems like there's an inherent conflict there, and I don't see how the GOP can reconcile that without actually being quite deliberate about getting rid of one or the other, unless they enjoy that tension, unless that's helpful to them. And certainly many people have speculated in the past. Oh boy, I should get it by Eric because I can barely breathe tonight. I do think it's an interesting thing that we're witnessing, and I don't think we should walk away from these events, whether it's January the 6th and Roger Stone's involvement in January the 6th, and say, well, these are just stunts, these are dirty tricks that he's pulling off here. The truth of it is, these are much more than just dirty tricks. They do cost people's lives. They do ultimately impact how people think about their country. They do take away the oxygen from other news, as you point out. They're a distraction from other news. And, Roger Stone may walk around feeling like he's some sort of, circus master. But truthfully, he's caused a lot of damage to the American political system. And I don't think we should be patient with this stuff anymore. After seeing what happened with January the 6th, and clearly his involvement there, he's continuing to pull the strings of all these characters. And so when you look at who really pulls together the whole anti-Semitic ecosystem, it looks a little like this, and it's sorry, 1 second here. It looks like this. So you've got Roger Stone, Alex Jones, Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Milo, and Nick Fuentes. This is how we got to Kanye West is an anti-Semitic figure, and let's give Nick Fuentes a whole bunch of free airtime in the last few days by putting him on the air. This is not. It just doesn't strike me as being sort of like organic anti-Semitism that's arisen from the grassroots up. It's a play. It's a play that's been placed in front of all of us by an intelligence operation or some sort of grouping, and they're just sucking up the oxygen. And when you really think about it, Rupert Murdoch certainly very close to Israel. Some would say very close to Israel. He owns Tucker Carlson's show. The Mercers own Candace Owens. Mercers and Murdoch probably own Donald Trump. Alex Jones, who knows who owns him? Probably the Russians. We've spoken about Roger Stone and Nick Fuentes. We don't know, but we're talking about basically an intelligence thing that's going on here.
Well, that is the great mystery, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, so these are the cartoon characters that were foisted up upon us. These are not the real players. So.
No, they're not. But they're taking up a lot of the oxygen. You watch, these breathless news anchors hour after hour talking about how Kanye is evil and all these things. It's like, or Nick Fuentes is like the devil. He's a terrible guy. Like, he says terrible things, but he's not. He's not Hitler. He's something else that's being made to upset people. And I think we've got to, understand what these things come up when they're cartoon characters and that they're shows made to distract us. We need to be really aware that that's exactly what's going on. I was going to do a lot about Elon Musk today. I can't do that today because we don't have time. But we'll do it on Thursday. It's a really fascinating expose into Elon Musk's supposed university education, which also turns out to be quite fabricated. And, it reminds you, again, that you can't believe everything you read, especially not on Twitter. But that's the show for tonight. Eric, it's good to see you again. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving, and welcome back. We'll be back on Thursday night and keep on doing what we do. All right. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you again. Oh, don't forget, you can always subscribe or support Narrative by going to patreon.com/narrative. And if you like, you can also subscribe to your YouTube channel that you're watching right now. If you're watching on YouTube or on Twitter, don't forget to follow Eric Garland or Zev Shalev and switch on your notifications so every time we go live, you get to watch our show. Thanks very much, and see you next time.
Every minute of Narrative's reporting, every story that we break is made possible by our patrons. You too can become a patron by joining at patreon.com/narrative.
Narrative, where truth lives.
Every minute of Narrative's reporting, every story that we break is made possible by our patrons. You too can become a patron by joining at patreon.com/narrative.
Narrative, where truth lives. One day you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny. and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narrative, where truth lives.
Hi there, it's Zev from Narrative. Have you ever had a great business idea but just didn't know where to start? Well, one of the first steps to building a new business is a domain name by Hover. That's because it's more important than ever to have an online presence, and your domain name by Hover is your first step in building your online brand. For a limited time at hover.com/reach, you get 10% off. Hover makes it quick and easy to find the perfect domain name for your business with over 400 available extensions. And with their Connect feature, you can easily connect your Hover domain name to many popular website builders with just a few clicks. Plus, Hover offers free Who Is Privacy. That's free Who Is Privacy. That protects your personal information from being released online. Don't let the complicated search, sign up, and connection process of other domain providers stop you from starting your online brand today. Hover makes it easy to get started, so what are you waiting for? Find your perfect domain name at hover.com/reach. Plus, Narrative Live viewers get 10% off right now if you use the promo code REACH, that's REACH, or go to hover, HOVER.com/reach, REACH.